The factory floor in Sestroretsk smelled of machine lubricant and coal smoke. It was February 1916, and in a corner workshop cluttered with blueprints and metal shavings, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and wire-rimmed spectacles assembled a device that would make every general in the room go silent, not from admiration, but from confusion. Vladimir Grigorievich Fedorov lifted the rifle carefully, its walnut stock gleaming under the workshop lamps. It looked like no service tool the Russian Empire had ever seen. Shorter than the standard Mosin Nagant, heavier, and when he pulled the charging handle back, it made a mechanical whisper that promised something the old guard couldn't yet imagine. Rapid fire in the hands of a common infantryman, the skeptics arrived within the hour. Generals with chests full of decorations from conflicts fought with bolt actions, and bayonet charges circled Fedorov's workbench like birds of prey examining a target. One picked up the piece, frowned at its weight, and scoffed at the selector switch. "Rapid fire," he said, voice thick with doubt. "Infantry cannot be trusted with such complexity. They'll waste supplies. They'll panic." Another officer, younger but no less dismissive, gestured to the strange magazine protruding from beneath the receiver. "And these cartridges? Japanese? You expect the Russian soldier to use Japanese supplies?" The room filled with uncomfortable laughter. Fedorov stood silent, hands folded behind his back, watching them mock what he had spent 6 years perfecting. He knew something they didn't. The future of modern engagement had already arrived at their doorstep. They simply refused to open the door. The Eastern Front in 1916 was a furnace of tragedy. For 2 years, the Russian Imperial Army had lost men to the frozen soil of Poland, Galicia, and East Prussia. The German Empire sent coordinated machine positions that turned every Russian advance into a disaster. The Austro-Hungarians, though weaker, held fortified lines that consumed entire regiments. Russian infantry engaged with courage that shocked the world, and with tools that belonged to a previous century. The Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifle was reliable, accurate, and powerful. It was also brutally slow, 5 rounds loaded via stripper clip. Bolt worked manually after each shot. Against trenches bristling with rapid-fire systems and heavy artillery, the Mosin was a sword brought to a mechanical struggle. Losses mounted into the millions. Entire units ceased to exist. Officers reported the same tactical nightmare: insufficient capability at the decisive moment. Squads pinned down by a single German position couldn't suppress it long enough to advance. The answer from high command was always the same: send more men. In his workshop corner, Fedorov had studied reports of the fallen until the numbers burned into his memory. He read field dispatches describing brave soldiers falling meters from enemy trenches, their bolt actions no match for concentrated rapid fire. He analyzed every tactical failure through the lens of a capability deficit, and he had built the solution they refused to see. The generals left that February afternoon without ordering a single rifle. Behind them, they left rejection paperwork citing budget constraints, doctrinal incompatibility, and logistical hurdles. Standard bureaucratic language for a more profound truth. They couldn't imagine a struggle being different from what they knew. Fedorov returned to his workbench. The Avtomat lay where the last general had dismissively placed it. He picked it up, felt its weight, and ran his fingers along the machined receiver. 9 pounds loaded, 600 rounds per minute. A 25-round magazine that could be changed in seconds. Outside, snow fell on Sestroretsk. Somewhere to the west, Russian soldiers were preparing for another offensive with tools designed for the previous century. And in a cluttered workshop smelling of lubricant and failure, one man held the future of infantry engagement in his hands. No one wanted it. If stories like this make you question what you do when everyone says you're wrong, but you know you're right, tell us in the comments, and stay with us for the next chapters. How long can you struggle for something when everyone says you're wrong? Vladimir Fedorov had been born in 1874 to a family of modest means, entering the Mikhailovskaya Artillery Academy in St. Petersburg with an engineer's mind and a soldier's heart. By his early 30s, he was recognized as one of Russia's most brilliant designers. But brilliance in the rigid hierarchy of Imperial Russia meant nothing without rank and connections. While colonels debated cavalry tactics and generals planned offensives with 19th-century doctrine, Fedorov studied reports from the front with a designer's obsession. He read accounts of German shock troops, specialized units using grenades and concentrated firepower to break trench stalemates. He analyzed French attempts at automatic rifles, the heavy, unreliable Chauchat that jammed in mud. He examined every principle of design through one unrelenting question. What does the infantryman actually need when he's facing heavy positions across 200 meters of barbed wire? The answer came to him not as inspiration, but as brutal mathematics. A soldier needed selective fire, semi-automatic for accuracy, automatic for suppression. He needed a tool light enough to carry on the march, controllable enough to hit targets under stress, and reliable enough to function in snow, mud, and harsh conditions. And critically, he needed an intermediate cartridge, something between a pistol round and a full-power rifle round. The standard 7.62 54mm used in the Mosin Nagant was too powerful for rapid fire in a rifle-weight tool. Its recoil made controllability impossible. But Fedorov had found something remarkable. Japan's 5.50mm Arisaka cartridge. Less recoil, flatter trajectory at common combat ranges, perfectly suited for a selective fire tool. The irony didn't escape him. Russia's recent opponent in the Russo-Japanese conflict had developed the cartridge he needed. But irony was irrelevant. Function was everything. Between 1913 and 1916, Fedorov worked in the shadows of official disinterest. He used personal funds. He begged for factory time. He hand-built prototypes in workshop corners, while procurement officers ordered another million Mosin Nagants. His design was revolutionary in its simplicity, a gas-operated selective-fire rifle with a 25-round detachable magazine. It weighed just over 9 pounds loaded. It could fire 600 rounds per minute on full automatic or deliver precise semi-automatic fire when needed. The selector switch gave the infantryman choice, something no service rifle in the world provided. But when Fedorov presented his prototypes to authorities, he met a wall of institutional resistance. Infantry will waste their supplies. The complexity will cause malfunctions. Japanese cartridges are unacceptable. Every excuse masked the deeper truth. The generals couldn't imagine a struggle beyond what they knew. They saw rapid fire as a specialist's tool, meant for heavy teams, not riflemen. They couldn't conceive of a future where every soldier carried overwhelming capability. In a small apartment near the Sestroretsk works, Fedorov's wife watched her husband grow gaunt from sleepless nights. He came home with metal shavings in his hair and calculations scribbled on his shirt sleeves. She brought him tea he didn't drink, meals he barely touched. "Vladimir," she said one winter evening, "they will never accept it." He looked up from his blueprints, spectacles reflecting lamplight. "Then more lives will be lost," he replied quietly. "And that will be on my conscience as much as theirs." She said nothing more. What could she say? Her husband had built something the world needed, but refused to want. At the Artillery Academy, Fedorov's former colleagues watched his obsession with a mixture of pity and concern. One, an engineer named Tokarev, found him in the workshop past midnight. "You should go home," Tokarev said. "This won't change their minds." Fedorov was hand-fitting a gas piston, his movements precise despite exhaustion. "I'm not trying to change minds anymore," he said. "I'm making sure it's perfect, so when reality forces them to see, the tool will be ready." Tokarev studied the prototype on the bench. Even in dim workshop light, its engineering elegance was obvious. And if reality never forces them? Fedorov set down his tools. For a long moment he stared at the rifle that had consumed years of his life. Then I will have failed those who needed this. But I won't have failed because I gave up too soon. In March 1916, reports of the fallen from the Eastern Front reached new heights. Entire divisions were being shattered against German defensive positions. The Mosin Nagant, reliable as it was, couldn't deliver the volume of fire needed for modern engagement. Fedorov read each report with growing desperation. Somewhere in those statistics were men who might have lived if his rifle had been in their hands. The weight of potential felt heavier than any metal. Orchestrated comprehensive narrative framework for 6-part historical fiction. By late 1915, the Russian forces were buckling under pressure. The Brusilov offensive of 1916 would require every advantage available. Supply shortages were so severe that some units engaged with bayonets only, their rifles having no ammunition. In this chaos, Fedorov found an unlikely ally. General Alexei Brusilov had seen too many good men fall charging heavy positions. Unlike the procurement officers and doctrinal committees, Brusilov understood something fundamental. Tactics were written in sacrifice, not ink. When doctrine failed on the field, soldiers paid the price. He arrived at Sestroretsk on a cold morning in early 1916, unannounced. Fedorov was testing a gas system modification when a staff car pulled up outside the workshop. "Show me this rapid-fire rifle," Brusilov said without preamble. No pleasantries, no skepticism. Just a general who had run out of patience for tools that couldn't win struggles. Fedorov demonstrated the Avtomat on the firing range. The sound of sustained rapid fire cut through winter air, a sound Russian infantry had never made before. 25 rounds downrange in seconds, controlled bursts, rapid magazine changes, semi-automatic precision when needed. Brusilov watched in silence. When the demonstration ended, he picked up the rifle, worked the selector switch, and examined the magazine well. "How many can you produce?" he asked. "And how quickly?" The answer was heartbreaking. Manufacturing capacity was limited. Tooling was slow. The Japanese cartridge required special arrangements. Fedorov had built prototypes with personal funds and borrowed factory time. Full-scale production would need official support, budget allocation, and supply chain coordination. Everything the bureaucracy had denied him. Brusilov's jaw tightened. He understood immediately. Here was a tool that could change infantry tactics, trapped in a system designed to prevent change. "I'm ordering production," he said. 3,000 rifles. Whatever you need, you'll have. But even a general's authority had limits. Production orders could be issued, but factory capacity couldn't be conjured from air. The Sestroretsk works were already stretched, building Mosin Nagants. Tooling for the Avtomat required modifications, new machinery and worker training. And the Japanese supplies presented their own nightmare. With complex wartime alliances, sourcing the 6.5 sound 50mm cartridge became a diplomatic and logistical puzzle. Fedorov threw himself into solving each problem with the same obsessive precision he'd applied to the design. He worked 18-hour days. He slept in the workshop. His wife brought meals he ate cold at the workbench. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said one night, finding him asleep over blueprints. He woke with a start, disoriented. "People are already falling," he said. "If I work myself to exhaustion and it saves even one life, that's mathematics I can live with." She touched his face, felt the fever of exhaustion burning there. "And what mathematics justify leaving your family behind?" He had no answer for that. The rifle demanded everything. Lives demanded everything. There was no equation that balanced both. By spring 1916, the first production rifles began emerging from Sestroretsk. Not thousands, dozens. Each one hand-fitted, tested, and adjusted. Quality over quantity, because failure in the field would doom the entire concept. Fedorov inspected every rifle personally. He checked gas system alignment, trigger pull weight, and magazine fit. Workers watched him handle each piece with something approaching reverence. "It's just a tool," one machinist said. No, Fedorov replied quietly. It's the difference between a soldier having a chance and having none. There's nothing just about that. The official designation came through Avtomaticheskaya Vintovka Fedorova, the Fedorov automatic rifle. 3,200 rifles ordered. It wasn't enough to change the entire conflict, but it was enough to prove a principle. In his workshop, late at night, Fedorov held one of the first production models. 9 pounds of machined steel and walnut stock. The weight of 6 years' work, the weight of institutional rejection, the weight of lives that might be saved. Outside, the struggle consumed men by the millions. Inside, one engineer had built the future. Now, he just had to convince the present to use it. Do you think you'd fight the system for what you believe works, or accept what doctrine says is impossible? Comment which path you'd take. And share this episode with someone who loves real innovation stories from history. What would you sacrifice to save lives no one knows you're saving? The first units equipped with Fedorov Avtomats received their tools in late summer 1916. Elite formations, shock troops, and soldiers selected for adaptability. High Command treated it as an experiment. Limited distribution, careful monitoring, ready to declare failure at the first problem. Fedorov knew this was his only chance. If the rifles performed flawlessly, they might expand production. If they failed, if soldiers mishandled them, or if malfunctions occurred, the entire concept would be buried in reports forever. He traveled to training camps to oversee instruction personally. He showed soldiers how to maintain the device, clear jams, and adjust the gas system for different conditions. He watched their faces as they fired for the first time. Shock, then understanding, then something like reverence. "This changes everything," a sergeant said after the first exercise. Fedorov wanted to believe him. But he'd heard promises before, watched them dissolve in bureaucratic resistance. The real test would come when these rifles faced fortified positions. In Sestroretsk, production continued at an agonizingly slow pace. Each rifle required precision manufacturing beyond standard tolerances. The gas system needed careful fitting. The selector mechanism demanded exact specifications. Mass production techniques that worked for Mosins failed for the Avtomat's complexity. Tokarev found Fedorov in the workshop one evening, staring at production logs. "We're behind schedule," Tokarev observed. "We're always behind schedule," Fedorov replied. "The question is whether we're ahead of necessity." Word from the front arrived in fragments. Officers' reports, letters, rumors filtered through supply chains and evacuation routes. The Avtomats were performing. Squads equipped with even 2 automatic rifles could suppress positions that previously required heavy support. But official reports remained cautious and non-committal. High Command wasn't ready to acknowledge that a tool they'd rejected might actually work. Then came the first confirmation from the field that changed everything. A report from a junior officer in Galicia, buried in routine paperwork. His squad had been pinned down by a heavy position. Mosin Nagants couldn't deliver enough suppressive fire to allow movement. They were trapped, taking losses, waiting for support that might never arrive. 2 soldiers with Fedorov Avtomats provided covering fire, while the rest maneuvered. The rapid fire forced the crew to take cover. The squad advanced. The position was taken. Losses, 0. The officer's conclusion was matter of fact. The automatic rifle proved decisive. Request additional units be so equipped. Fedorov read that report a dozen times. Request additional units be so equipped. 5 words that meant soldiers understood what generals couldn't see. But winter was coming, and with it, challenges no rifle could solve. The Russian Empire was fracturing. Unrest simmered beneath military discipline. Supply chains collapsed. Political chaos consumed attention that should have focused on tactical innovation. In December 1916, Fedorov received word that Brusilov had been reassigned. His patron, the one general who understood the Avtomat's potential, was being moved. The timing couldn't have been worse. Production, was just reaching sustainable levels. Field reports were just beginning to accumulate. The window for proving the tool's value was just opening, and the political ground was shifting beneath everything. Fedorov stood in his workshop, surrounded by the machinery of innovation, and felt history slipping through his fingers. He had built the right tool at the right time for the wrong empire. Outside, snow fell on Sestroretsk. The factory floor still smelled of lubricant and smoke. Rifles continued rolling off the line, 3,200 of them, each one a perfect argument for a future that was running out of time. In his apartment that night, his wife found him staring out the window. "It's not enough, is it?" she asked quietly. "It was never going to be enough," he said. "But it's something. When the world is ready to listen, the proof will exist. We built it. We tested it. We sent it to the front. The truth is in the metal, not in what anyone says about it." She put her hand on his shoulder. After 6 years of obsession, sacrifice, and institutional struggle, he had created something revolutionary. Whether history would remember, it was beyond his control. The only thing left was to wait and see if reality would finally force the world to pay attention. Orchestrated comprehensive narrative framework for 6-part historical fiction. The first months of 1917 brought reports from the field that arrived like messages from another world. NCOs described their shock at seeing common infantrymen suppressing heavy positions, something previously impossible. Officers noted that squads with even 2 Fedorov rifles could advance under fire, laying down suppression while others moved forward. The tool didn't make soldiers invincible, it made them effective, but the numbers remained tiny. 3,000 rifles among millions of Mosins. A proof of concept, not a revolution in tactics. Not yet. Then came the report that should have changed everything. A captain named Volkov commanded a company in the Carpathian sector. Half his men carried Mosins. 32 had Fedorov Avtomats. In March 1917, his company was ordered to take a fortified position that had repelled 3 previous attempts. Doctrine said it required heavy preparation, overwhelming numbers, and high risks. Volkov tried something different. He organized his Avtomat-equipped soldiers into teams. While Mosin riflemen provided precision fire, the automatic rifles delivered suppression that forced the defenders to keep their heads down. His squads advanced in bounds, one element moving while another laid down covering fire. The position fell in 40 minutes. Russian losses: 11 wounded, 2 fallen. The position neutralized. Volkov's after-action report was clinical. Automatic rifle capability permitted fire and movement tactics previously impossible with standard weapons. Success ratios improved dramatically. Recommend expanded distribution. The report reached Fedorov in April. He read it 3 times, then set it carefully on his workbench and allowed himself one moment of quiet vindication. 6 years. 6 years of rejection, mockery, and bureaucratic resistance. And now, in precise military language, a combat officer was describing exactly what Fedorov had promised: capability that changed tactical equations. He wanted to show it to the generals who dismissed the tool, wanted to force them to acknowledge the lives saved, wanted recognition that being right mattered, even when everyone said you were wrong. But history had other plans. By summer 1917, the Russian Imperial Army was collapsing into revolution. The new administration that inherited the tool was too consumed by internal conflict to appreciate its significance. Production ceased. Supply chains vanished. The knowledge required to maintain and manufacture the Avtomat scattered with fleeing engineers and departing officers. The Fedorov Avtomat saw continued service through the following internal struggles, carried by elite units who understood its value. But in the chaos of change and reconstruction, the rifle faded. The design was archived. Vladimir Fedorov continued his work, but the window had closed. In his workshop, Fedorov held one of the last production rifles. The factory was quiet now. Most workers had fled or been conscripted. The machinery sat idle. Lubricant and smoke had given way to dust and silence. He thought about Volkov's report. 11 wounded, 2 fallen. How many more would be lost in the coming years because institutional resistance had prevented wider distribution? How many lives could have been saved if the generals had listened in 1916 instead of 1917? But those were questions without answers. All he had was this. He had built the right tool. The field had proven it worked. The truth existed in metal and reports, regardless of what happened next. Tokarev found him there one evening, rifle across his lap. "It's over, isn't it?" Tokarev said. "This chapter is over," Fedorov replied. "But the principle isn't. Someone, someday, will build this again. They'll call it revolutionary. They'll claim they invented it, and the world will believe them." "Does that bother you?" Fedorov considered the question, running his hand along the rifle's receiver one last time. "No," he said finally. "What bothers me is knowing we could have saved lives and didn't. The glory doesn't matter. The people do." He set the rifle down and walked out of the workshop. Behind him, the Avtomat remained on the bench, the future of infantry engagement, born too early for the world to accept. Outside, the nation was tearing itself apart. Inside, the tool that could have changed the outcome gathered dust. History would remember this moment as a footnote. Fedorov knew it would be more. Someday. History vindicated Vladimir Fedorov in the cruelest way possible. 25 years after he built his automatic rifle, another power unveiled the world's first modern infantry rifle, according to popular mythology. It used an intermediate cartridge. It featured selective fire. It gave squads unprecedented capability. Historians called it revolutionary, but Vladimir Fedorov had built the same tool a quarter-century earlier. He had proven the concept in Russian factories while leaders were still in exile. He had deployed it in the field while the generals who mocked him planned offensives that cost millions of lives. The world simply wasn't ready to listen. The Fedorov Avtomat became a footnote, remembered by specialists but forgotten by history. Production numbers were too small. The empire that birthed it collapsed, and the union that followed was too proud to acknowledge an earlier era design. But in the quiet archives of engineering, the truth remained. Fedorov's blueprints showed every principle that would later define infantry design: intermediate cartridge, selective fire, detachable magazine, and portability. When legendary designers created the famous models of the next decades, they built on foundations Fedorov had laid, though few acknowledged the connection. When global alliances eventually abandoned full-power rifles for intermediate cartridges, they walked a path Fedorov had pioneered in a Sestroretsk workshop while the Tsar still ruled. The man who saw the future first received neither glory nor recognition. In 1966, Vladimir Grigorievich Fedorov passed away in Moscow. He was 92 years old, an elderly engineer whose greatest achievement had been credited to others, whose vision had arrived too early for a world not yet ready to understand. His obituaries mentioned his contributions to development. They noted his long career. They did not mention that he had invented the modern concept in 1916, or that institutional resistance had buried an innovation that might have changed the Great War. In the end, the tool itself became a historical curiosity. A few hundred surviving examples scattered in museums, marked with small plaques explaining early automatic rifle, limited production. Collectors valued them for their rarity. Historians noted them as footnotes, but those who truly understood engagement looked at the Fedorov Avtomat and saw something else. Proof that genius recognizes necessity before the crowd accepts it, that innovation fades when institutions refuse to evolve, and that sometimes the greatest visionaries are those who solve tomorrow's problems, while their contemporaries are still fighting yesterday's struggle. Vladimir Fedorov didn't just design a rifle. He imagined the infantry of the future, and then watched as the world took 3 decades to catch up. The tragedy wasn't that his tool failed. The tragedy was that it succeeded brilliantly, and the men who held power looked the other way. His final words on the subject, recorded in his memoirs decades later, carried no bitterness, only quiet certainty. "I built what the soldier needed. That some refused to see it does not change what it was." In the cold mathematics of history, he was right. The design philosophy he proved in 1916 became the dominant standard of the 20th century. Every force in the world eventually adopted the principles he demonstrated. Millions of units, all following the path Fedorov pioneered. But by then, Vladimir Grigorievich Fedorov was gone, a name in footnotes, a ghost in the machine of progress, the mind behind the tool that history forgot to remember. In a St. Petersburg museum today, one of his rifles rests in a glass case. Visitors walk past without stopping, drawn to more famous pieces, more celebrated innovations. But the Avtomat remains, silent testimony to a simple truth. Being right before anyone believes you is the hardest kind of victory. And sometimes the greatest legacy isn't recognition. It's building something so true that the world eventually has no choice but to follow. The factory floor in Sestroretsk no longer smells of lubricant and smoke. But the principles Fedorov discovered there echo in every modern infantry tool. He saw the future first. The world just took decades to catch up. If this story reminded you that changing the world often means being right before anyone believes you, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. What does it cost to be right when everyone says you're wrong, and to watch the world prove you right only after you're gone?